I guess one of the biggest questions right now, especially in the AI field, is not necessarily about artificial intelligence per se, but about what intelligence is. So, just from
Hmm.
your background and from your studies, what do you think intelligence is?
Yeah, so I would say that kind of briefly, the kind of one sentence compressed summary would be um, intelligence is the ability to obtain objectives across a wide variety of circumstances, right? So someone who can sort of maybe you can be really great at like metalwork or something, and or you can be really good at woodwork, right? But like and maybe like a beaver is incredible at woodwork, right? But we wouldn't say that that makes them super intelligent. It's like a particular skill which is maybe as impressive to cultivate, but to but when we talk about something that's like highly intelligent, we want it to be flexible. So throw it into um, some sort of situation it's never seen before, then it can figure out what's going on and can find can adapt and sort of find some solution. Um, yeah, I think that actually Paul Graham has Sam Altman is founder of OpenAI. He said so Paul Graham has said about him that he's just an incredibly formidable person where you could drop him off in the middle of nowhere in some other like some random country, some random group, and he'd just sort of rise to the top, and you'd come back and he'd be the ruler. And I think that's sort of an example of what I think of as being someone who's highly intelligent. They're just able to kind of adapt um, and and succeed even if you drop them in some circumstances they're not really prepared for. Uh, so yeah, and there is sort of a formalization of this idea of being able to succeed across diverse circumstances, which is called the Legg-Hutter intelligence, which was so this was invented by Shane Legg, who went on to co-found DeepMind, now Google DeepMind, but at the time, DeepMind, and he and my one of my current advisors, Marcus Hutter, who invented the AIXI model, and they came up with this intelligence measure, which is basically like so like kind of very informally stated is sort of like you imagine you take your sort of agent and you put it down in some random environment and then you let it kind of interact with that environment and pursue it has to figure out what the goal is in the environment. It gets some sort of like signals that tell it when it's doing well, which we call rewards. And then you can kind of give it this score of like how well did you do in that environment. And you don't want it to be just one environment, so you kind of sum up its performance across this like wide variety of environments, and kind of you have to choose how to sort of average this out so that it comes out to a finite number. And then that's how you score the intelligence of the agent. So I think this is a decent measure of intelligence.
Just to kind of take a step back, I've been struggling with the terminology of artificial intelligence and in the AI industry in general. It seems like
Hmm.
people are using things like sentience and consciousness and all of these things
Hmm.
very loosely. Are you, Cole, happy with the terminology around intelligence and artificial intelligence from 1956 to now? Like, would you update anything or would you kind of like precisely define things differently?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. Um, I think the biggest problems will be that certain terms will be used um, by different people just kind of in different ways. Yeah, consciousness might actually be sort of the biggest the kind of most difficult example of this, where uh, when you say consciousness, you might just sort of mean like, oh, it's like it can deliberate and plan and like maybe additionally you want it to be able to reflect on itself and sort of know about what. So maybe you say if something's conscious, it's sort of self-reflective. It thinks about thinking. Like this kind of I would call that just I would just call that self-reflection, right?
Sure.
Um, and sometimes people would even say conscious just means like awake, which is like maybe doesn't really apply to AI systems. Like, or what does it mean for an AI system to be asleep or awake? I think what people usually mean by conscious is, at least what I mean when I say conscious, it's like that you have some kind of first person experience. Like it feels like something to be you. Like if you experience some enjoyment when eat some like delicious foods. You you see when you see something red, there's something that redness looks like to you. That's called by philosophers a qualia, right?
Yep.
Um, and I guess David Chalmers has written a lot about this kind of
Thomas
and
Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat?
yeah, yeah. That's actually I think there's even a sort of a there's some Chinese philosophers I can't remember the names who use that specific example. It's like I'll never know what it's like to be a bat because I'm not a bat. Um, and I don't know if you remember the reference, but I think so. Usually when I use the word conscious, that's what I mean, and I would say maybe like um, self-reflective or something or kind of deliberative for those other things. Um, that's the worst example. Then there are some things like artificial general intelligence, which people have different ideas about. I agree. I think I do use this term, but I think it may be a mistake to sort of focus on this term because I think it's more of a scale. There's more of a scale of generality, right? Like I think humans are a lot more general than like a beaver. Like a beaver, like you dropped out a human down in like the woods and we might just die, whereas a lot of animals could survive in the woods. But humans maybe have some chance of working out how to survive in different environments. Um, though historically, actually, we're not great at this. If you drop out down explorers in some area where they have never been before, there's a lot of stories of them kind of starving unless they find the native people. Um, but we have more generality than an animal. But it doesn't mean that humans are like fully general. So when people say AGI, you assume that in practice it's never going to be fully general either. There's going to be something that it can't do, right? So so I think maybe it can be better to say like that we're talking about when we say AGI, we're usually talking about something that's as general as a human. So it's more like human level intelligence that we usually mean. Um, and then we can say artificial superintelligence is we usually mean more intelligent than a human. And for me, I think that's to some extent that's the same. That's very similar to saying more general than a human.
I just want to double click on that very quickly
Yeah.
because it already seems like we have like ASI, artificial superintelligence, in the form of like chess and Go. And this is my dilemma because on the one hand, we solved chess, quote unquote, in
Hmm.
1997. We solved Go in 2019 with AlphaZero,
Hmm.
but ASI hasn't come full, like wholesale. And so this is the thing of like people say, oh, ASI is here, it's going to come, but it's like it's artificial narrow superintelligence.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Actually, in Marcus's latest book, he has this table of sort of projected arrival times for different kind of types of AI, and he uses the term artificial general artificial general superintelligence, I think, which is something that's you know more general and more capable than humans across a wide variety of tasks. So I like how you put this narrow superintelligence. This is true. Like we've had computers that can multiply huge numbers for a long time, but that's not the same thing um, as as being, a drop-in replacement for a human worker in kind of any kind of capacity. And then it turned out that certain things that we expected to require general, like human level generality and intelligence, like chess, people thought at one point. Um, I forget who it was. I think it was Hofstadter who said that. No, it might have been. I forget if it was Asimov or Hofstadter. He said if if you build this, if you build a, yeah, I think Hofstadter. If you build a chess playing robot that's as good as a human, maybe it would just say like I don't want to play chess anymore. I'd rather talk about art or something.
Mm.
So you'd have to basically this argument is like maybe if you uh, maybe in order to solve chess, you sort of have to solve everything else because there's so much strategic and creative aspects to the game of chess that you'd have to create sort of this highly general mind that would be able to be a top performer at chess. And that turned out to be false. Um,
And yeah, it turned out to be false. And we also now, from that, have so much literature that details, again, like the 2010s, I think, will be a very pivotal time when people look back on saying kind of whatever you want about AI and AGI. That's at least what I feel, because we had so many books, and not to tarnish the authors, these are people I look up to. I really, you know, idolize a lot of them, like Max Tegmark with Life 3.0, Stuart Russell with Human Compatible, Nick Bostrom with Superintelligence. All these books were groundbreaking in their field, but they kind of just said, frankly, anything in terms of what AGI would be. And now that we're coming to the Chat GPT kind of mini singularity in 2022, it's nothing like that. And so I think maybe I should track back. Maybe they said everything that they could about our current understanding of AGI and AI, but we had to backtrack in 2022 because, frankly, again, we didn't need AGI and all of these things to solve certain problems that ChatGPT solved.
Yeah, I think I agree. The kind of fascinating thing about LLMs is that they don't seem to be AGI, but they do things that is it like 5 or 10 years ago, people would have said, of course you need AGI to do that thing. You can hold an intelligent conversation. You could even just like start playing chess with the same agent. So the same agent, not a specialized chess agent, but you can even play chess with these LLMs. I think they're not great typically, but there's some ability to play chess. Um, they're they can solve math problems. They can do all these things that you would assume this sort of diversity of ability would require kind of cracking the code of whatever makes humans intelligent, and then you'd be able to do everything. But in fact, I don't think this is true. I think that this is sort of another example of where this like something like chess falls. It turns out to be easier than the kind of general case of intelligence that humans have. And language, maybe language abilities are in that same category. They seem more general. I think they are more general, but you don't get everything. At least not yet.
Yeah, so this is maybe a point of friction between us because I'm rather unimpressed with LLMs, but I find the modern lingo around it, modern conversation interesting. And so
Hmm.
again, I want to double click on that with you, which is, so you just said LLMs are kind of not AGI. So we're in agreement with that. But
Yes.
you also use an interesting word, diversity of skills or diversity of ability. So wouldn't you say that LLMs would indeed have some generality with them or about them?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that LLMs are more general than chess bots. I think that's pretty clear because you can even, I mean, all right, you can convince them to play chess, and you can have a conversation with them about politics or law or medicine or whatever. And they aren't super reliable, but they're at least pretty convincing.
Mhm.
And they're not they don't just purely confabulate either. There's some grain of truth. Something they say is more likely to be true than not. And you can even see that some of the frontier models can perform really well on these like um, tests that even graduate level humans might have trouble with. Like mathematics tests. It's kind of an objective right or wrong answer. Clearly, they're doing some kind of thinking right. Now, t to be fair, it's always really tricky with these systems because they are the training process is typically proprietary. You don't really know what went into them, and it's hard to say how much is memorization versus like actual like insight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's obviously not like pure memorization. That's something they're too flexible for that. It's not like they've seen every single math problem you've ever generated before. They're able to sort of do some sort of pattern matching that was previously impossible for AI systems. Um,
And that's the thing is LLMs at the edge are not very good when dealing with novelty. At least when everybody says right now, this is the worst they'll ever be. So sure.
yeah.
And so when we look back to what you were saying about like the spectrum of general intelligence, it seems like LLMs are on the lower end of the scale. So what do you think that they would need in order to start like gaining more tiers? Would it just be like bigger data sets, more training data, or would it need something else? Or is there another approach to achieve generality? Not with LLMs, but in artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe I think it's worth like kind of taking a step back and talking about sort of how these things are trained, right? So, I mostly specialize in sort of the theoretical computer science and mathematics of this model of intelligence, but I have done also some work with LLMs, so I can give you a decent summary of how this works. Though there's presumably a lot of tricks of the trade inside of the leading labs that nobody else knows, right? So, um,
I would hope.
yes, I guess otherwise they wouldn't be leading, yeah. But so basically, what you do is you take a ton of samples of text from the internet, and text can be kind of construed pretty generally. It might include encodings of things like chess games that we wouldn't normally really think of as text, right? But that have some textual encoding, and sometimes even people use even like video, like I'm not sure how much they use video, but like images and stuff to train multimodal models as well. Multimodal means basically more than one sense, and um, and you you train the LLM to predict the to so if you give it like the beginning of a chunk of text and you give it ask it to predict the continuation, like the next word, right? So this is called the pre like this is similar actually to something from my field of algorithmic information theory, which is the basis of AIXI, which is called the prequential problem. It means like you get some prefix of a sequence. So I guess that's why I like to say prequential, right?
Mhm.
Prefix of sequence. And you have to predict the continuation. And if the sequence has a lot of structure, you end up having to discover a lot of things about what's going on behind the scenes. So even people say it just predicts the next token, but yeah, but to predict the next token, you kind of have to figure out what's going on, right? So it's like you like it would be when you're having some conversation between journalists or something, like you it would be useful to start to figure out, okay, which who's talking right now, what kind of dialects do they use, and all this other stuff, and eventually even what's their political philosophy, all this stuff would be useful for predicting the next token. So you end up building up this sort of understanding just by trying to do pure prediction,
Mhm.
right? So this is so yeah, so the kind of surprising thing is that when you just train these LLMs in more and more text, at the beginning they're just sort of like kind of using basic rules of grammar to predict what might come next. And maybe I think GPT-2 wasn't even really consistently grammatical, but then later on it starts to get higher level stuff. It starts to get a lot of what's going on in predicting the sequence. So you end up getting this really great text prediction engine, and um, but kind of crucially, it still is sort of constrained to very this where all of its thinking has to happen between predicting one token. So it's not really natively able to think things through for a very long time. It can't like pause and be like, okay, this is a really hard question, so I'll think about this for a while. And it can't sort of, and no matter what it learns earlier on the sequence, um, like maybe it does some thinking when it's predicting word four, right? Then when it's predicting word eight, that's completely wiped away. It's forgotten it completely. It just sees words one through seven and has to start over. Uh, so to me, this is like it seems a little bit unlikely that this scales all the way um, to AGI because kind of in context. So in context meaning when you're outside of training, you're interacting with this thing after it's finished this training. I think it's going to have a little bit of trouble learning within a conversation. It's going to have a little bit of trouble making longer term plans and pursuing longer term objectives. Yeah, people have a lot of or have attempted a lot of sort of hacks to get around this.
Mhm.
Um, give let it so they've rather than just leaving this thing as a pure prediction engine, they try to train it to also sort of like spend more time thinking about things and then refine that into a better answer. And um, we're able to get some improved performance out of this. It's not clear if you can get all the way to human level intelligence, but I suspect probably not.
Yeah, it feels like scaling LLMs in that way is what people assume should be done, but they don't look at it from the fundamentals and from first principles, and it just feels like it's not practical. Like we already know that high quality data is going to run out by 2026. We're already approaching, the limits of physics in the sense of scaling bigger and bigger models requires so much more energy, which we probably don't have, at least right now. And so, I guess maybe a high level question is what do you think the fixation on LLMs is right now? Why? Is it just the money or is it something else? Is it a low hanging fruit?
Well, I mean, the I guess the first thing to keep in mind is just that it's super impressive, right? So if if you are just an ordinary person and I tell you that I have an excellent chess playing robot, maybe you don't really care that much. It's like, okay, maybe you don't even play chess, right?
Mhm.
Um, and maybe it sort of seems like the kind of thing that a computer could maybe be able to do. But when you have something that's actually able to converse with you, this like to an ordinary person, this seems really impressive and it seems really intelligent. So then this a lot of people want to use it. A lot of people want to interact with these things. And I mean, that means there's a lot of money there. It also just means there's a lot of enthusiasm. It's something cool to work on. So a lot of people end up wanting to work on it. Um, and, it's not completely misguided. It probably is the most general uh, kind of AI technology um, that we have invented up to this point. So that makes some sense. Um, the other thing is that it's been consistently surprising how well this framework works, right?
Mhm.
This just next token prediction thing. This this sort of architecture that I'm talking about is called a transformer.
Mhm.
Um, it's so this technically the transformer is like this is the specific technology that we use to or algorithm that we use to try to solve this next token prediction problem, where it just has the context and kind of myopically predicts the next token, and um, and it's not the first thing that people have tried for language modeling. Previously, there were some ideas that kind of sounded more plausibly uh, generally intelligent, like recurrent neural nets that could actually sort of remember what they'd been thinking at the previous step and so on. But weren't as stable um, to train. And in practice, these transformers just really work incredibly well. Um, and um, there's kind of a few technical reasons for that, I guess, but it's probably not worth getting into. The point is that that this paradigm is just much more successful than anyone expected. And because no one can say why it works so well, no one can say when it'll stop getting better. So people just want to keep pouring more money onto it, and at least up until a year or so ago, it looked like the more money you pour in, the smarter the thing gets. So there was this sort of enthusiasm to just like see how far this can be pushed, right? This is called the scaling paradigm. And some there's some kind of projections about how good it should get, which are called scaling laws.
There's a kind of mystery with the fascination and fascination with the mystery with LLMs. So then
Hmm.
let's forget. Oh, if you want to say something, please.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to move on to, kind of the point of us talking today. Let's forget LLMs and go to AIXI or
hmm
Universal Artificial Intelligence. So just for the listeners who are new to the concept, can you give us an accessible explanation of what AIXI is?
Yeah. So earlier, kind of, I described this idea of what is a general intelligence, and we're gonna have this measure of intelligence, which is the performance across these a diverse array of tasks, and IXI is the ideal according to that measure. So it's kind of the most general intelligence according to this measure. And the way that so actually that can serve as a definition of IXI. But it's more interesting to think like how does this thing actually work, right? Um, so the way that it works is um, it's considering so you drop it down to some new environment, right? It doesn't know what it's interacting with. It knows nothing about it. So it has some like uncertainty the over the environment that it's in, uh, and uh, and to deal with this uncertainty, it has a lot of different hypotheses that it initially considers plausible, and a little more formally, like any environment that you could write down as a computer program with some uh, access to some random seeds, so some parts of it can just be random, um, is one of the hypotheses considered by AIXI. It's like so pretty much in my opinion anything that you could possibly think of as an explanation for your observations is one of the hypotheses that AIXI has in mind. Um, and um, but it's not certain which one of these hypotheses is true. So initially, it actually uses probability theory. So this is what's called kind of the Bayesian approach to probability, where you treat probabilities as degrees of certainty. And I think this is actually kind of not exactly the standard school of probability, but I think it's the most interesting and the most general way to approach probability theory, where it's sort of the Laplace called it it's common sense reduced to calculation, which is just which is the probability just sort of re- the probability just encodes how sure I am about something. So if I say 99% probability that I don't know, someone's going to win the election after I've seen nearly all of the votes tallied or something. That means that doesn't mean, this, of course, this election will never be held again. It just means that I'm 99% sure. So this is just a measure of my certainty, right? So AIXI has this hypothesis, and it has a certain probability or confidence in each of the hypotheses. Uh, and then as it starts to interact with the environment, it updates those confidences. If the interaction is matching hypothesis or sort of predicted by a hypothesis, then that hypothesis starts to seem more plausible to AIXI. And uh, kind of crucially, throughout the interaction, AIXI always keeps every possibility in mind. So this is, it doesn't disregard any of the hypotheses. It's like um, whenever it makes a decision, it kind of takes into account um, the risks of the risks and benefits under each hypothesis, and it weighs those by its confidence in the hypotheses. And this is sort of the classic decision theoretic approach to decision making.
So I'm not going to pretend
Um,
that wasn't as technical as humanly possible, but I do want to ask, there's so much money in LLMs right now, so much hype, so much mystery, fascination, uncertainty. Why choose IXI over pursuing LLMs?
um, I don't think that um, it's not really an either or, right? So AIXI is a framework um, for understanding what intelligence is, right? And it's sort of this gold standard for intelligence. Uh, so you don't sort of you can approximate AIXI more or less directly, but you don't have to choose sort of like. But it's not like you kind of throw out the LLMs and just sort of focus on building AIXI from first principles. Actually, you can try to understand LLMs using the AIXI framework, and maybe you can get some sort of inspiration out of um, out of AIXI about what is missing from the LLMs. So in my mind, the LLMs are really excellent at this prediction task, but they don't have the same sort of planning abilities as AIXI. Uh, and so you could say, maybe the thing that's missing here is the um, planning ahead um, across kind of all these possibilities. And in fact, relatively recently, people have started kind of sort of imbuing LLM agents with that ability through what's usually called like tree of thoughts or chain of thoughts, um, where you'll kind of s sample the LLM, have it consider one possibility, and then have it kind of branch and consider a different possibility, and then try to sort of uh, combine these into um, taking whichever to continuing whatever line of thought seems most promising, right? So this can be considered a sort of an AIXI approximation. Um, yeah, so I would say that the two kind of the theory and practice are sort of complementary to each other.
And so I know I'm putting you on the spot for this, but if there's nothing to be said, then we can move past it. But I do want to ask, how would you envision combining AIXI with ChatGPT, for example, just to give people like a concrete understanding? But if that's
Hmm.
not something that we can talk about because, the vision doesn't make any sense, then we can definitely move past that.
Well, I mean I mean what I just described with the tree of thoughts or the chain of thoughts can be considered an approximation of that idea, right?
Mhm.
Um, the these sort of later versions of uh, LLM agents from OpenAI, like O 03, they had O
Yep.
01 and O 03. Um, they both have they do this sort of private thinking where they sort of plan their response, think through different possibilities. That could be viewed as a sort of weak IC approximation.
Mm.
Before, I've actually argued that what you would want to do is beyond just having the model think kind of internally about what its best response should be. You should also use the model to sample, maybe what will the user say next, um, and kind of plan multiple steps ahead. Like, okay, based on the potential response from the user, um, then what would I have to say to that, and what would kind of be um, my next move, right? And if you plan ahead multiple rounds of interaction like that, then you start to look a lot more like the XC model.
So how are the kind of research applications and studies on AIXI evolving? Can you share some interesting things, or are you guys moving super fast, or are you guys taking your time? What are the promising directions for AIXI?
Yeah, so um, a lot of the work on AIXI involves kind of safety aspects
Mm.
of the like how can you build um, an AI system which will you know pursue your interests and will not sort of do something unexpected or something that you didn't want. That's often kind of the goal of a theoretical framework, right? Is to be able to make some advanced predictions um, about ahead before the fact, right? Instead of just like sort of try things and see how they work out. It's could be a little bit risky, right? So you imagine if you actually were able to successfully build something like an IC approximation, it's been argued that the um, that so the in its standard formalization, IC just pursues this like reward signal, which I described earlier, which means like you basically tell it how well it's doing at every step. Maybe you
Mhm.
press a little button and IC is uh, rewarded based on whatever you press the button, like, oh, good job, So like maybe you win a game of chess, press the button, whatever. Maybe it's an automated system. So then, it's been argued that this would incentivize IXE to kind of take control of the of that button and kind of get rid of you and prevent you from ever stopping it from just pressing the button over and over again, right? So this is sometimes called like wireheading. So some work uh, from people like Tom Everett and Michael Cohen has been like, how can we design a version of IXE that will not want to do something like that? So it will it, it will kind of not be incentivized to cause the button to be pressed
Mm.
by means other than doing what we wanted it to do. So it won't come up with that kind of tricky methods for getting extra reward. Um, so one proposal is sort of just to have it only think so far ahead, and do the task at hand, and then when the interaction ends, it's not planning any further ahead beyond the task, so it has no real reason to try to control the reward mechanism. Um, Tom Everett is particularly interested in sort of understanding through causality, sort of what it means to cause outcomes by an intended path or an unintended path. Um, so that's one direction. Um, I've been recently working on whether you can have some alternative goal system for AIXI, which is kind of sets aside the reward rewards entirely. Maybe you have maybe you teach it through some other means
Mhm.
um, what its goals are, which is similar to some approaches with that are being pursued with LLM agents as well. Um, so you have I think OpenAI's approach to the the alignment problem or AI safety is called deliberative artificial intelligence,
Mm.
where you specify sort of the principles that an AI is supposed to follow in the form of text, and then when it's making a decision, it sort of reflects back on that text and tries to decide what actions would be best in line with those kind of operating procedures, right? Which
Sure.
is that's very different than the reward framework. And I think Anthropic has a similar idea of constitutional AI,
Yes.
which works along sort of similar lines.
Well, I
Like,
would want to ask just subjectively for you, what's your preferred future for artificial intelligence?
so if I had a kind of a magic wand that I could wave, um, what I would actually want is instead of setting our AI systems loose to just go out into the world and um, kind of pursue their best understanding of our objectives. Um, Even if we had kind of done a good job of helping them understand what we want, uh, it seems like kind of a bad outcome to me. I wouldn't really want to be completely to sort of be disempowered to be the second most intelligent species on the planet, while some super intelligent machines made all the important decisions. Um, I would I would rather see human intelligence sort of be elevated to the level of the machine intelligence, maybe through some sort of fusion process, right? So through, you have these like the furthest out would be this sort of like Neuralink like companies where you have some way to actually directly connect your brain to machines. Um, but maybe you could imagine that you do something less extreme, just like have some like AR glasses or something, and you have some really fast version of your own thinking, which you can kind of sort of like a artificial reflection of yourself, which you can sort of interact with at rapid speeds um, and kind of expands your mind in that way. I think that would be the ideal for me. Um, and Yeah, one of the advantages of studying the AIXI framework is that it doesn't just talk about um, machine intelligence. It talks about intelligence in general, including the intelligence of humans. So it can studying AIXI, I think can also be a way to understand to understand human rationality, and maybe we can get some insights into to how to improve um, our own rationality and kind of become more intelligent beings. Um,
So it doesn't just augment us technologically, but it augments us philosophically as well.
Yeah, right, right. I think that AICE sort of gives a philosophical understanding of what intelligence is.
Sure.
And by investigating the framework, maybe we can start to understand um, how we can think more clearly and effectively.
Sure.
Um, Of course,
There's,
ultimately, to keep up
yeah,
with AI over the course of decades, we would need some sort of technological augmentation as well. But understanding how to do that properly, I'm not exactly eager to just sort of fill my brain with electrodes and hope for the best, right? When you're augmenting humans as well, you want to have some sort of theory of like of what it means to boost a human's intelligence while still keeping their kind of personality and goals intact. This kind of thing.
sure.
I think ultimately that's the solution for the alignment problem that I would most like to see.
Well, that's where we differ because I'm looking forward to filling my brain with electrodes. That's actually my future.
I'm happy to fill my brain with electrodes if I know that that I know what I'm doing, right?
Gotcha.
I just want to know that I'm not going to destroy something or completely mess up my motivations in the process. And just, I don't want to become a zombie that's being driven around by an AI overlord or
Well,
whatever.
I know for a fact that you're familiar with the philosophical zombies problem, and so that
Mm.
might be something that becomes a reality in that hypothetical. I do want to ask you, other than AI, what technologies are you most excited for? Like genetic modification, nanotech, um, mixed rea or XR.
I mean, there's kind of, I mean, to unpack that question a little bit, right? Like, there's some technologies that would be really awesome, but I'm not sure that we're going to see them anytime soon, right? Like, people seem to be really hesitant to use genetic modification in humans, even to do things like cure genetic diseases, which probably nobody would really like to continue. Well, actually, there's even some small group of people who think that like it's unethical to remove certain genetic disabilities.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's some truth to it, right? Like there's some places where maybe it's a spectrum, right? Like you wouldn't want to remove if you try to completely purge like severe autism from the human species, maybe you also remove, you know, all these genetic markers which are actually useful for other things, like like
I
Elon
could
Musk is mildly autistic and obviously he's
Yeah, I
pretty
could
successful.
understand
So
that argument from like if we, let's say we removed autism, but we would lose out on all the second order things that autism
yeah,
provides. I get that. But if somebody is going to say, I have a problem with editing genes just to eradicate diseases, I would say then are you against medicine in general? Because
yeah,
that
right.
would
I
be,
agree. So I think it'd be awesome to have genetic engineering in humans. And there have been some, projections where if even by just polygenically screening embryos, so doing something like, um, this is called like embryo selection. So like you have a few different embryos that you could um, kind of implant and then ultimately they could continue on to become children. You just pick the ones that seem to have be the highest scoring along some metrics. Um, Maybe you could try to max out their intelligence, or at the very least, you should be able to remove certain diseases. I think that would be awesome. But like I'm super excited about the potential for genetic engineering, but but I'm not confident that I'll see it anytime soon. So this is why I say it's like this is something that I'm super excited for. Like yes, but also I'm not confident. Um, and yeah, I feel the same way about these things like Neuralink. I would love to see these kind of neural implants, but I'm confident that it'll be a technology that's adopted by people. I'm also pretty excited about quantum computing. Um,
yes.
so this is a little bit of a this is something where we kind of don't really know how far this can be pushed in practice. I think even quantum computing experts are not sort of clear, don't really agree on like how many practical applications it's ultimately going to have. But I wouldn't be surprised if in a decade or so we have some really um, effective kind of quantum algorithms, maybe for things like material science and maybe even like things like nanotech. Initially, quantum computers were proposed as being basically chemistry engines. So this seems like a plausible application.
I want to know if I'm reading you correctly, but it seems like when people talk about articles and say, quantum computers will give us 50 years of innovation within a week or stuff like that. It seems like you would read that and kind of smirk and say these people have no effing idea what they're talking about. Is that correct? Like I think you look at things from first principles and fundamentals, and you actually like look at it logically and don't just buy into the hype.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a theoretical computer scientist, so I know a little bit about the kind of about quantum algorithms and kind of what they can achieve in theory. Um, but I'm not a specialist in this area, and also a lot of these problems are still open. So I think it's important to kind of keep your expectations in check there.
Sure.
It is true. So I mean, I mean Scott Aronson has a blog, Shall Optimize. He does a kind of a good job of sort of being realistic about these things, but also being he's he's like hopeful. Based kind of a realistic assessment of quantum computing. So I recommend people read that if you're interested in sort of a more grounded approach to quantum computing.
We interviewed him
But
on the podcast, and it was one of those interviews where I understood about 10 minutes, and then for the rest of the 30 minutes later, I was just blown away, but also, what the heck is going on?
yeah,
That was
yeah.
a fun conversation.
Um, yeah, actually, I think I noticed that. I forgot though. Yeah, yeah. But I did look through some of your previous guests. So that's great. So yeah, I strongly recommend looking at his stuff. So maybe your viewers already knew this. Yeah, and I'd say so it's kind of unclear on the algorithm side what can be done, but it is true that on the hardware side, it seems like there's been a lot of progress lately. Again, not my area of specialization. So
What does it mean to be a theoretical computer scientist?
yeah, um, so a theoretical computer scientist studies things like um, like algorithms and how difficult computational problems are. Um, in my case, I'm more focused on just sort of the computability of different problems. So the AIXI model is sufficiently kind of idealized that it's not even strictly speaking computable. You kind of there's some like loosened so it's kind of like you can kind of come up with computable approximation algorithms, right? But you can't just compute you can't just like write down a piece of code for AIXI and run it on your computer, right? But you can sort of approximate it. So there's some kind of intricate questions there about like computing like how can AIXI be computed in principle? And so and these things these are ultimately sort of mathematical questions because we kind of idealize computation. Like we're not thinking like what can I compute in practice on this computer sitting on my desk, right? Like we're thinking about like if I had a sufficiently powerful computer and I ran it for potentially a very long time, you know, what can in principle be computed? So um, it's these kind of questions, right? It's more about algorithms than computers. Um,
Yeah, these last couple questions were just for me, so I don't really care if the
okay.
audience like them. I enjoyed I've enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Yeah.
It's nice to look at AI. Again, it feels like a lot of people are looking at artificial intelligence from just the hype perspective or the profit
hmm
perspective, which I find uninteresting. I like looking at AI from either the technical perspective or just from the philosophical perspective. And so I think we covered a lot of ground in both of those silos. As a last question, it doesn't have to be about technology or AIXI, but you can go there if you'd like. What gives you hope in the world?
Hmm. So I have um, a lot of kind of, I wouldn't quite say faith, but sort of, I really strongly believe in the Enlightenment values, you know, the scientific revolution and the legacy of the Enlightenment. And I think that over the last few centuries, you know, pe people are starting to kind of become more rational and kind of understand our place in the universe a little bit better. And also kind of um and that kind of includes recognizing our common humanity, right? And I think that given enough time, I think that we'll continue to sort of learn about these things and we'll start to, you know, learn to sort of think more carefully and be more humble and know what we don't know. And I think that if we manage to not destroy ourselves for the next couple hundred years with AI or whatever, I think I have a lot of trust that people will become wiser over time. And I think I can see this in the sort of rationality community, the which which I sort of consider myself a part of, the rationalists and effective altruists. But overall across the board, there's sometimes some places there will be steps back, and maybe certain parts of the world, people are becoming a little bit more like ignorant, maybe there's some misinformation, confusion. But overall, I see this kind of upward trajectory of kind of increasing wisdom.
which is promising for once.
Yeah.
Where can we find you online?
Oh, so am, so my name is Cole Wyeth, right? Go to colewyeth.com. That's kind of my personal website. And I have occasionally read blog posts there. Um, but you can also, I'm particularly active on the website LessWrong.
Oh,
I,
really?
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah, I
love
have
that.
um, so if you go and, maybe I'll also drop like my less wrong profile page so you can see that's where I do the vast majority of my
Sure.
less technical writing. Um, and you can also just like look on, my actual publications are all on my CV and stuff. So
We'll
um,
put that in the show notes, and I'll also check that out after we end here. I would love to look at your stuff. I'm in
oh,
love with
great.
the LessWrong community right now. They do so many pieces that I just adore. Learned so much just in the past couple of weeks by being on that forum. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a better place than
It's
Reddit
my
right
favorite
now.
corner of the internet.
Yeah,
It's a place where you can have like a serious discussion without it really ever devolving into kind of name calling or ad hominem attacks or any,
yeah.
yeah, it's a
The ad
civilized corner of
hominem,
the internet.
gosh, the ad hominem aspect of social media is just so
Yeah.
difficult. As soon as you bring up a counterpoint, they say, "Oh, look, it's a whatabouter or something like that." It's just like I don't get how we can again contribute to human wisdom if we're constantly making fun of people for their character and not their arguments.
Yeah, right. That's the problem. People get very defensive about things that a discussion is it's implicitly it'll be about whatever topics under debate, but usually there's also a lot of other things that kind of get dragged into it, which is like how are you signaling which group you're a part of, and just does what you're saying sort of sound good and is going to be popular with your friends and whatever. And this kind of thing can totally ruin the truth finding um, ability of a conversation. Yeah, so I think that places like LessWrong do a better job of kind of having these good standards of conversation. We'd
Yeah.
call kind of epistemic standards.
I think what social media did, just to end off, is that they it corrupted truth from truth capital T to subjective truth. And what
Hmm.
places like Less Wrong do is reverse it. So it turns subjective truth into truth capital T, which is very good to see, especially now. And if we can build on those principles, we can hopefully provide more human wisdom to our grandchildren and on.
Yeah.
But Cole, thank you so much for being here. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me and putting this conversation together. It was a lot of fun.